Professor Suniya Luthar is professor of clinical psychology and developmental psychology, a graduate of Yale, where she earned her doctorate, and multiple NIH grants. She has essentially created a field around resilience and thriving in young people, and we have many discussions about what is spirituality in the second person in our relations to one another. And you're a great visionary around this, and I look forward to your sharing your work with us.
I am focusing on where is the need for us as psychologists to be attentive to the lack of spirituality, if there is such a thing, a group, a population, and as you will see, I will tell you, there is such a group and potentially big implications of their lack of access to all the gifts that spirituality potentially has to offer. Who is this group? Affluent kids. When I say affluent, I am not talking about dot-com millionaires. I'm talking about my children. I'm talking about your children, children of doctors, lawyers, and professors, upper middle class, white-collar professionals. Why am I looking at them? Like it or not, many of them are going to be leaders in various fields, education, business, politics, what have you. The other reason I said is, and you will see the data here, we stumbled upon findings about their profiles that beyond their dazzling resumes and their achievement levels and what have you, that underlying all of this often was a great deal of distress. Data. I'm just going to briefly share with you maybe 3 or 4 slides with the data. This is percent of adolescents drunk in the past month. The orange bar here is national norms. This is, so huge national normative sample. This here is East Coast suburban youth, and this is girls and boys. These are students in a private school in a large city. Very exclusive private school. I don't need to tell you, you can see it, 3, 4, 5 times as high percentages of getting drunk. Similar data with marijuana use, similar data with hard drug use, and use of prescription drugs and ecstasy is soaring, soaring. What about distress? Anxious, depressed, withdrawn, depressed, somatic complaints, phobia, and so on. Again, blue is our, in this case, it's not East Coast. For a while there, I thought maybe it's just us East Coast people, right? So off we went, and this is Northwest, a suburban community in the Northwest. Same patterns again. The orange line will tell you where national norms are. This is percentage of kids who have symptoms that are significantly elevated. It's not just having the blahs, but having really a significant level of symptoms in terms of numbers. This is where norms fall. This is where the girls fell and boys are anxious, depressed, and so on. But this is what has really captured my attention over time. The bar here I'm referring to, the 2 columns are rule breaking, random acts of delinquency. What we found is that you might think that, well, stereotypes will tell you, it's the inner city kids who are delinquent and who go breaking into things when there's no need to. In our comparisons of our kids with kids in bleak poverty, we found comparable overall levels of delinquency with one big difference. The inner city kids do things like carrying a weapon or get into a fight, which could be potentially to protect themselves, right? Survival. Our kids, as I said, random acts, stealing from mom, stealing from a friend, defacing property, so on and so forth. This finding has been troubling me a great deal, not just the substance use, but the rule breaking, which we're seeing over and over again, regardless of East Coast, West Coast, public schools, private schools, suburbs, or city. We're seeing it over and over again. Envy. Again, people would think people without money are envious, right? These are our kids, particularly our daughters. This is envy of peers. If your friends do better academically than you do, if they're prettier, more attractive than you are, if they're better at sports, if they're more popular, or if they have more money. Of course, these are all skills. I'm simplifying the presentations for you. These are the inner city kids. The dotted lines, and the solid lines are our kids. Envy is uniformly higher among upper middle class children in white collar families than it is among inner city kids who are stereotyped as being envious. I haven't got those data on these slides, but we've also found the same thing on extracurricular activities. Our kids do much more on sports and on performing arts and on academics. Civic activities such as going to temple, charity work, and so on, it's the inner city kids who are higher. So our findings essentially are, and one of my doctoral students and I just published this paper reviewing, again, multiple cohorts. We're seeing the patterns over and over again. Our children are showing there's a typo there, very high disturbance compared to the average American teen and compared to their inner city counterparts. So the question is, why? How can we help? What's going wrong when the kids are not doing well? What's going right when the kids are doing well? Because not all these kids, God forbid, not everybody is troubled, right? There's a range. What I'm telling you is that we've got a disproportionately large number of kids in our families who are very troubled. Remember, I talked about percentages. 7% in the average American population, and among our kids, more like 20%, 25%. You with me? So the question is, what are the risk factors? What characterizes those 20, 25%? And one of our big findings is it's a tendency toward to be oriented more toward what are called extrinsic goals. I want to be rich. I want to be famous. I want to be popular. I want to be admired by many, as opposed to intrinsic goals, generosity, kindness, respect for others in need. Now, the interesting thing is, of course, all of us want all of the above, right? To some degree. We all want to be somewhat, at least comfortable, respected, admired. What we look at is sort of a ratio or a difference between the two. So where does the balance fall? Are you more extrinsic compared to intrinsic, or are you closer? And what we're finding is that when among our kids, those who are disproportionately on the extrinsic, willing to let the intrinsic stuff fall by the wayside, who are more into fame and money and wealth and popularity and saying, helping and kindness and generosity is all good and dandy, but not quite as important. These are the children who are sometimes most at risk for the kinds of difficulties I showed you. What are the protective factors? What keeps our kids grounded? Our grandmothers could have told us this. They probably did. It's intuitive. Good relationship with parents. Not just a good relationship, and we've established this with our data, when mothers and fathers say, let me rephrase that. When kids say, I believe that my mom and dad, above all, want me to be a good, kind, respectful, decent human being. Second is, make money and be famous and whatnot. That is hugely protective, not just for their personal adjustment, depression, anxiety, substance use, but guess what? Also for their academic grades. So paradoxically, when kids feel like their parents are pushing, get ahead, get ahead, get ahead, get ahead, get ahead, it not only is associated with more depression, anxiety, and substance use, but it's also associated with lower academic performance. So having parents who value and also obviously model it, do as I do, not as I say, right, is very important. Of particular importance is relationships with mothers. Now, believe me, I'm not by any means saying that fathers are not important. What tends to happen in a lot of these families is fathers work very, very long hours and are not around quite as much in terms of spending one-on-one time with the children. They are very important, but when you look at in what is called multivariate analyses, partialing out for unique associations, again and again and again, it comes out. The quality of relationships with moms is very important. This is not about mom bashing. I'm a mother. I have a 22-year-old, almost, he'll be 22 next week, and an 18-year-old. I know what it's like. It's a hard job. And I know that the kids respond. And I know they react. So for anyone who says, does this mean that the father is not important? Obviously not. But the bottom line is, what our data are showing us over and over again is, if you want to prioritize and come down with one or two, the top thing, what do we go to? We're seeing it over, even for these, as I said, successful college-bound, big, tall, handsome, attractive, beautiful, accomplished young women, whatever, even they're saying, when I feel alienated from mom, when I feel like mom doesn't get me, when I feel criticized, and I don't feel close, or I feel like mom's value system is just do more. She just wants me to accomplish more. It hurts. There's no way around it. So then, how are we doing? If you think causally, right? If I'm telling you, all right, our kids are not happy, and their happiness seems to be related to our happiness, question is, how are we doing? There's been more and more now in the media about women, mothers like myself. This is Judy Warner's book, which was probably about now, it's probably a decade old now or so, but there's been many more since with the same theme, that essentially that we are not fulfilled or feel enormously gratified. To the contrary, there's angst and a sense of self-doubt and guilt and conflict. This is according to her own experiences, her research, whatever experience she did. But my task was, all right, we're seeing it in our kids. We're seeing it particularly in our daughters. Could there potentially be something going on in us, the mothers, that might be mirroring or mirrored by what we're seeing in our children? So we did this large study. We're actually in the process of writing it up, maybe 3,000-4,000 women, mothers, across socioeconomic groups, but oversampling for women who with college degrees and graduate degrees. Money does not mean happiness by any means. We are not only are we not necessarily doing better than our less educated counterparts, but oftentimes we're actually more stressed, more unhappy, more, you know what that means.
Round up.
Thank you. Well, then again, think causally. Kids to mothers, mothers to, all right, so how do I function well? If my children's groundedness is tied to me, how do I dole it out? What helps me be a decent, good enough mother? To use Winnicott's term. And I'm just going to give you this one finally. This is subjective well-being, anxiety, depression, feelings of emptiness. After all I've done, I still look around and I feel like life feels empty, right? And feelings of stress. Across all of these, there's a one-item question. Do you feel seen and loved for the person you are at your core? I believe psychologists call it unconditional love. Guess what? Mothers need it too. We are charged with the task of doing this for our children. And God knows we try our hardest, but it is a difficult job. And trying to dole out this kind of, the combination of, obviously the love and affection, but the limit setting, the priorities, the don't go nuts about. If you don't get into Yale, sweetheart, you'll get an education. It's not the end of the world. Right? Trying to keep your balance, living in that, what I call the culture of affluence. It's a hyper-competitive, and I'm not putting anybody down, least of all myself or my kids, right? But we do. There are pressures, just like there are pressures in poverty, of violence, of gangs, what have you. We have a different set, but very potent set of risk factors in our subculture, which we are only just beginning to recognize. So this is where I'm coming to now, is saying, trying to understand what it is that helps mothers, parents, the primary caregivers do well. And in doing this work, when Lisa and I talked about this and what is spirituality and how does this connect with, I use the old-fashioned term love, which psychologists don't often use. We have nice fancy words like support and intimacy and such. But love is too loosey-goosey or something. When I was talking to Lisa, I was thinking about Bodhisattva. I'm thinking about, this is from Buddhism, right? There's 10 states. This is the highest state. A state of devotion to alleviating others' suffering. Same thing about Bodhisattva, Of these 10 states, if you're trying to achieve that state, this is always hindered if you are in these lower states of suffering, despair, and anger. Makes common sense, right? How can I be helpful and kind and generous to you if I'm in pain myself? Yes? So if we, as caregivers, and I don't mean just mothers, I mean us as teachers, as gurus, as educators, anyone who is charged with, who has the responsibility for seeing this child, this young person develop from infancy onwards, and they don't stop. In high school, they don't stop. As I said, keep emphasizing. There are 18-year-olds who are brash and confident and look so self-assured. Inside, so many of them are crumbling. Point is, for those of us who are charged with helping these children thrive, how can we do it if we're not fed ourselves? And given our data, we're showing that so many mothers, women like myself, and like many of you in this room, are not feeling, are hindered too much by suffering, aloneness, despair, and not feeling that unconditional love. Do you feel seen and loved for the person you are at your core? So that's where my road is taking me right now, working on this book, Who Mothers Mommy? If moms have to do it, where are they going to get the strength from? How do we make that happen? And we must, not just for the sake of our young people who are going to be the future leaders, who are going to change, hopefully, our value systems in a more positive direction, are going to value generosity, humanity, the greater good. Not just for them, but for heaven's sake, for us too. We matter. We're not dead yet. Thank you.